The Final Furlong podcast is proudly brought to you by Jeff Banks Bet. Get up to £500 refunded as real money for new Jeff Banks online accounts after your first month of betting. Use promo code FFP500 at jeffbanks.bet. And by BetterHelp. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Our listeners get 10% off your first month. So give online therapy a try at betterhelp.com/FURLONG.
Great to have your company on the Final Furlong podcast as we switch our attention to some of the novice hurdlers that are really interesting us for the new jump season. We'll do so in the company of the author of Paul Ferguson's Jumpers to Follow. Surprisingly, his name is Paul Ferguson. Welcome back to the show, my friend.
Hi, Emmet. Good to be back.
We're going to talk about some of the novice hurdlers that are really interesting us for the new season. Just looking at the current crop, you've been talking to the top trainers and the top owners. When you're looking at both sides of the Irish Sea, which one do you think has the stronger strength and depth?
Oh, I think if you look at the championship bumpers, you'd obviously lean towards the Irish and the way things have been going the past few years. But I do think there's a strong team of novice hurdlers, particularly actually you talk about mares, novice hurdler, a couple of mares top my list when we start talking about them in a minute. I think there will be a couple of good mares this side of the Irish. I think that'll be a strong division in the novice hurdles this year. As for the champion bumper itself, I'm not actually sure whether how strong a renewal this year's was in terms of going forward. And again, like Jasmine DeVoe, similar almost comments in regards to a dream share from the previous year. This time last year, I was slightly concerned about him physically and his pedigree going forward over hurdles. So obviously we didn't get to see him until another bumper later in the season. Jasmine DeVoe was a good winner on the day, obviously a significant winner, being Willie's 100th winner at Cheltenham Festival, brought up in a race that he has dominated over the years. But there was a couple in behind I thought were possibly might have the scope to improve past the winner when it wants to go hurdling. So again, we might touch on that as we go into the show.
There's definitely one of them that I'm particularly interested in for the new season. I think some of the horses that I've gone for they're blindingly obvious, quite frankly, but some of them I'm trying to be that little bit more interesting.
I did try and go for a bit, certainly with some of them a little bit darker.
Yeah.
Not all necessarily novice hurdlers, but I say we'll start cracking through them shortly.
Well, I don't really see the point in doing this is our horses to follow list and then giving you El Fabiolo. Keep an eye out for him. He might be pretty decent. But those horses towards the top of the betting, Salvator Mundi is in the list, by the way, but I'll explain why. But at least he's a 20-1 shot for his race as things stand. But I think everybody knows those horses from the champion bumper. There just might be one or two that could potentially be floating a little bit under the radar. We'll begin with your first one. Before we do, by the way, if you like what Paul Ferguson has to say, and if you think, hey, I like the cut of that guy's jib, I'd like to hear more and read more about it. I'd like to subscribe to his newsletter. He doesn't have a newsletter. He kind of does, actually. But he does have the best jumps preview for the season. And you can get it now with £3 off at weatherbyshop.co.uk. £3 off your purchase of the Weatherbys Cheltenham Festival Betting Guide, exclusive to Final Furlong podcast listeners. Use your promo code FFJTF2425 at the checkout. FFJTF2425. And get £3 off the print copy, the digital copy, or the print and digital bundle of Paul Ferguson's Jumpers to Follow. And your first jumper to follow for this podcast is Let It Rain.
Yeah, I'm going to start with a couple of mares. Let It Rain represents Dan Skelton, and listeners or viewers may remember her winning impressively at Warwick first time out. When I think it was significant, how she was ridden in that. Often you see the Skelton horses that are well fancied in bumpers around her ridden, given plenty of time and daylight around the outside. And Harry certainly rode her with plenty of patience and confidence, won by 8 lengths with any amount in hand. She then went to Ascot for a listed race against the Geldons, and she beat a nice horse called Breaking Castle, who was actually entered in the Persian War tomorrow, not declared. But again, I think he'll develop into a nice novice hurdler. And the third from that race, a horse called Celtic Dino, came out and won at Wincanton subsequently to give the form a little bit of a boost. At the time, Let It Rain was being spoken about as a possible champion bumper candidate herself. That didn't materialise, but having spoken to Harry when we put the book together, it sounded like it wasn't really anything serious, and it was a case of precaution, and that she didn't run again. And you never know, that could be a blessing in disguise. Sometimes it's just to avoid those big bumpers. So she'll go hurdler now. And I would expect, despite the fact that she's got quite a stout pedigree, I think she certainly she didn't look to avoid the pace in bumpers, so I would expect her to start over the minimum trip. Knowing the way Dan likes to campaign them, I think she might be kept pretty low key to begin with. Try and win a small race and then win again under a penalty before they set their sights on something a bit higher. But I do think that, I know everything doesn't revolve around Cheltenham, but I would be surprised if they weren't already looking towards the dawn run at the Cheltenham Festival.
What are you talking about, man? You do a lot of Cheltenham content. This show does a lot of Cheltenham content. Don't know if you've noticed, but every horse racing podcast is all Cheltenham focused. The YouTube algorithm keeps telling us, Cheltenham, this is what the audience wants. My first one is not even quoted for Cheltenham. Jeff Banks bet doesn't think this horse is going to be headed to the Cheltenham Festival, and neither does anybody else. But I think he might be. I'm not saying you should be asking for odds for this fellow for the potato race, but Will the Wise is one that I'm very, very intrigued in for Gavin Cromwell. Gelding by Well Chosen, he's a half-brother to three winners, if I could use my mouth words correctly, including Jeremy Scott's hurdle and chase winner, Kisses for Katie. Won his only point-to-point start in the same 4-year-old Tortola maiden as Hollow Games and the Jukebox Man, so there's a bit of substance to this race. And he won on his debut for Gavin at the Punchestown Festival, where he was really strong in the market. He was sent off an 11-4 shot that day and very well backed. Briefly outpaced on the home turn, but he stayed on really strongly and showed a lot of determination to beat Gordon Elliott's Jacob's Ladder, who had the run of the race that day and probably should have won. He came into that having won his only point-to-point as well, and he'd given the field a slip. It was on soft ground. His point-to-point was on soft-heavy ground. Kisses for Katie won on soft-heavy. Given his pedigree, given his penchant for soft ground, those conditions for staying hurdles are going to be ideal for him in the winter. There's the big Faugheen novice hurdle. He won at Limerick back in the day and in the muck. That might not be his target, but that's the kind of race that I'd be thinking of for him. As long as he gets a good, strong pace to aim at, I think that's going to bring out the best in him. He's going to be a nice staying hurdling prospect this season. Will the Wise for Gavin Cromwell, and hopefully he can emerge as a Vanillier type to go and win the potato race, but not a recommended bet for that race as things stand, because, as Paul said, it's not all about Cheltenham.
Before I go on to my next one, I'd just say that the horse he beat in his point-to-point, King Caliphate, he caught my eye, finishing second in his point-to-point, and he's now with Emma Lavelle. Mm-hmm. I would think that he might be one for a bumper, or certainly a novice hurdle over this side of the Irish Sea. So, again, another name to take note, that is King Caliphate.
Your next horse is Diva Luna.
It is, yeah. Again, I say I stuck with a couple of mares to begin with. This one, she only finished second in her point-to-point, but she'd obviously been working well at Ben Paulin's when she first arrived, because he pitched her straight into a listed race where she beat a horse called Listen to Your Heart, who bolted up on her hurdles debut recently. But she stepped forward massively on that to win the Grade 2 nickel coin at Aintree on her second start. She's one of the horses I'm going to talk about who I've actually seen up close during the summer, and she's a really good-looking mare. In fact, and as Brian Hughes was quoted in the book, he rode her first time out and said he could be forgiven to think she was a gelding in the paddock at Market Raisin, and she's got plenty of size and scope about her. Again, she's got the pedigree suggests that going up in triple suit in time, but she doesn't look short of speed at all to me, so I would think she'd be campaigned over the minimum trip. And I think maybe listed contests such as the race at Newbury at the Old Hennessy meeting, or Taunton around the festive period, could be on the agenda for this one. I imagine she'll just go for a maiden hurdle or novice somewhere to begin with, but I'd think that again, they'll be looking to step her up in class sooner rather than later. Okay,
Diva Luna. Hopefully we'll have Fruggle on the show very soon. Did you think about putting in Regent Stroll in your list? I know he's not in your 10.
Yeah, he's obviously one of my horses to follow in the book. Yeah, I just thought he was, just the way people are talking about him at the minute, maybe he was a tad obvious, only maybe with the price tag hanging around him, but he is a horse that even since last summer when I saw him down in Paul's, he was quite an imposing individual, obviously from the family down the damn side of Denman, and he had plenty of size and scope about him. I wasn't surprised that he developed into a high-class bumper performer. I think he'll want a trip this year, though, because I think his best work definitely was late on in his bumpers, especially at Newbury, because they were kind of in a bit of a heap with a furlong, even a half furlong to run, but inside that last couple of 100 yards, he really stayed on strongly and he powered through the line. So I think we'll be seeing him over 2.5. He might start off somewhere like 2 mile 1 at Exeter on stiff track and soft ground, but I would think certainly as he goes up in trip, he'll want 2.5. As he goes in class, he'll want 2.5 miles. And I think he could well be the Challow Air Lords for Paul Nicholls this year.
He was the most expensive horse sold at public auction to go jumping, and then Nicky Henderson comes along and spends 1.2, 1.4 million pounds. Turns out jumps racing is actually great. Don't worry about it. Everything's fine. Everything's going fantastic. The gravy train continues to roll on. That's extra. I'm delighted to see that. It's brilliant, and it's great that Nicky's getting that horse too. The Final Furlong podcast is proudly brought to you by Jeff Banks Bet, where tradition meets cutting-edge technology, and with major flat racing festivals on the horizon and the new jump season about to kick off properly, it's time to leave behind the corporate bookmakers who don't value your loyalty. At this point, you've got to be fed up of their restrictions, endless affordability checks, and losing out on incentives just because you dare to win a bet. Jeff is the bookmaker fighting for your right to bet, giving you the freedom to enjoy British and Irish racing the way it should be, and you can watch all that racing on the Jeff Banks Bet app. So say goodbye to bookies who want you to lose your hard-earned money on their online casinos, and say yes to unbeatable odds and a bookmaker that truly values your custom, Jeff Banks Bet. Final Furlong podcast listeners who sign up to Jeff Banks online using the promo code FFP500 can get 10% of any net losses returned as cash after your first month of betting up to £500. It's an offer you won't see anywhere else. Visit jeffbanks.bet today and enter promo code FFP500 and join the excitement. That's jeffbanks.bet using promo code FFP500, because your betting experience deserves more. Just in case Trish took it out at the start, I'm not so sure what the editing process that Trish has done is, but Paul and I are trying to be informative, insightful, but not massively obvious. One of mine is completely everybody's talking about him, but I think that it makes sense for him to be in Paul's Jumpers to Follow book, but not necessarily for this podcast because we all know about him. Plus, Tom Malone was really bullish about him on the show a couple of weeks ago, so I can't tell you any more than the great Tom Malone can, except to repeat something he said, which is take his work, copy and paste it, and present it as my own. Belliano. I might also be copy and pasting some work from Paul Ferguson's excellent Jumpers to Follow, by the way, because there's a big write-up for him in that as well. But as he was saying, clocked the fastest time in his point-to-point at Bulta. The way Tom was talking about him that day, winning that race on heavy ground, the way he quick and clear of his rivals, he sounded pretty excited about him. He's taken the Willie Mullins approach, given him a year to acclimatise at Ditchat, strengthen up physically, mentally, bit of maturity, and then hopefully go and dominate some novice hurdles this season. I don't know if he's going to be a superstar, but he's going to win races, and he's going to win a lot. And the fact that he could win at Bulta, I'd imagine sharp tracks are going to suit him around the UK. Long-term aim will be something like Kempton, but Wincanton. Is it Worcester? Nicholas has got 4 winners from 11 runners at Worcester, so I'd be surprised if that's where he rocked up. I think they'll be aiming higher with him, but certainly a speed-favouring track like Kempton should suit him. I don't think ground's going to be any issue for him, and you'd like to think he's going to be a graded performer. Whether or not he'll be good enough to go and win one of the big graded races at the Cheltenham Festival, I'm not so sure, but he's a horse to be very, very excited about. He'll be a really exciting chaser, and he's just the type that Paul Nicholls does well with. So, Belliano, very high on the list, particularly for the early season races. Your third horse, though, is Bill Joyce.
Yeah, and he was one who ran down the field in the champion bumper. Again, another Irish point-to-point winner. He's now trained by John Joe and AJ O'Neill. New partnership, obviously. But he stepped forward on his point-to-point form to win his first couple of bumpers. And it's more based on that I've included them here than his slightly disappointing run in the champion bumper, which came less than a month after his second win at Exeter. So I just wonder if it was a bit of a last-minute decision to allow him to run. And maybe it wasn't the long-term plan originally. So first time out again, he was another one who won at Warwick. He actually beat a horse called Clapper Thunder, who runs in a decent novice hurdle at Chepstow tomorrow. He's probably horse viewers want to take note of, because he also then went across. He run a listed bumper at Newbury, behind Royal Infantry, and then he went across to Fairyhouse for that valuable sales bumper and ran against Kopek the Bordes, who I know, myself included, as a horse that a lot of people are looking forward to this year for Willie Mullins. So Clapper Thunder might be one to keep an eye on, just to have a look back at his bumper form. But yeah, Bill Joyce beat him on debut, and then he went to Exeter and in heavy ground really put Joyo Allen, who is full brother to Envoy Allen, put him to the sword on heavy ground, I say, and he just looks a staying type. So whether conditions at Cheltenham, I know they were on the soft side, but just whether that was what he really wanted so soon after that Exeter win remains to be seen. I think stepping up in trip Definitely he'll be one who I'd imagine will start at least over 2.5, and he clearly likes a bit of cut in the ground, so I think there's plenty of stamina in Bill Joyce, and he'd be one for staying novice hurdles for me, for John Joe and AJ O'Neill.
They've got Johnny who seemed to be really highly regarded in hurdles last season. Maybe they sailed a little bit too high with him early on when he got beaten in the shallow hurdle, but he's a horse I think will do well this season.
Yeah, I do, and then they've got him and St. Davy, and people who've read the past couple of editions of Jumpers to Follow will know that I've had both of them in there since they won the point-to-point. The two horses I've got a high opinion of, really, and Go and Chase and should see them at the best light, as you say. Johnny Who probably could start off over 2.5, I think, but St. Davy, I think out of the two of them, just given their physicality, I think St. Davy would be the one I'd be really looking forward to as a novice chaser, certainly over the staying trip. But say they've got quite a good team there, so hopefully the Jackdaws team can have a good campaign.
Yeah, they also have the only horse to ever beat Constitution Hill.
Go on, can you name him?
Any harm in asking?
Yeah, I was only asking. Yeah.
Hey. He's here all week, folks. Have we got the sound drop? One that I think is pretty obvious, but hopefully, because he was sent off at a few big prices, is going to slip under the radar a little bit. Is Gordon Elliott's The Yellow Clay. Shout out to Dennis O'Regan, who put me onto this horse, I think, a year and a half ago.
I think you included him last year when we done this, didn't you? After he won his 2 4-year-old bumper, he won that listed 4-year-old bumper, didn't he? And then it took a while to reappear.
Yeah, we didn't see him again till the Dublin Racing Festival when he was sent off an unconsidered 40-1 shot, but I'll come back more on that later. But Dennis really liked him as a young horse, and you can see why now. They kept him to bumpers last season. He was 6th in the champion bumper. He was very strong in the betting. He was sent off a 17-2 shot that day, so he was well fancied when Romeo Coolio was taking a right out drift in the market, and well, their performances on the track were a little bit different to one another, but he was way too free that day. He did way too much. But he settled a lot better at Punchestown when he was second in the big Grade 1 against the vastly experienced and probably shouldn't have been there, but well done to his connections, Redemption Day, will be the ripe old age of 12 going hurdling this season. Feels like that anyway. Best of luck to him for the new season. It was a long, long way back to Barry Connell's William Money, who I think is a really smart prospect for this season, but he's been put up by a few of the wise guys, so I decided to let them have him. Those two pieces of form I think are interesting. The one that's really key, though, is the Dublin Racing Festival. I can't tell you he would have won, but he should have placed. At the very, very least, he should have placed. Round in that final turn, he is travelling just as well as Emmet Mullins' horse, and the door gets slammed shut on him. I think it was Patrick Mullins started coming back through the field, sinking like a stone, and he took him with him. He went from being a length and a half off the lead to 6 lengths behind off the final turn, and he still stayed on really, really strongly. And the only horse that stopped him getting up for third was Redemption Day, who's obviously gone on to prove that form is pretty damn decent. You could say that A Dream to Share didn't run his race, and he almost certainly didn't, but that looks good form to me. I think Emmett's horse is going to be really good this season, but the Yellow Clay is the one that I'm particularly interested in. Intermediate trips should suit him. He's just the type, the son of Yates, that Gordon Elliott will absolutely thrive with. I'm very excited about him, and I hope he's going to be able to fulfill that potential that Dennis O'Regan was talking about a year and a half ago on the Final Furlong podcast. So the Yellow Clay, a long-term plan coming to fruition, hopefully, on the podcast, and very much one to be watching out for this season. Your next one is one for a good friend, Fergal O'Brien, Tripoli Flyer.
It is, yeah. There's a couple of pieces of form that we're both going to tie in and talk about. He started off in a bumper at Chepstow early season. There's another one from that race I'm going to nominate shortly. Probably a bit darker, bit of a dark horse, and he was given an educational ride on that occasion. Came from off the pace, and he stepped forward massively when winning the valuable all-weather bumper at Lingfield at the Winter Millions fixture, which obviously moves this season to Ascot and Windsor. But that form's really strong. He beat a horse called Kingston Pride, who I know you're going to talk about shortly, came out and franked the form. The third, Castle Ivers, came out, and he also won impressively under a penalty at Weatherby before runner Aintree, and Tripoli Flyer was runner-up in that Grade 2 bumper at Aintree, beaten by stablemate Horace's Pearl, who himself looks like a decent prospect for novice hurdles. But I thought Tripoli Flyer probably he travelled like the best horse for a long way and probably got to the front a bit too soon and idled a bit. And to be honest, I think he looks full of pace. So again, he'd be one who I would imagine will be campaigned over the minimum trip. I say he looks like he's got plenty of speed, so maybe a sharp test That'd only be maybe the one concern I would have there if he was pitched up in a couple of small field novice hurdles to begin with. He might be a horse who wants a bit of cover and a strong pace to run at. So maybe if things don't materialise and he wins as expected, maybe he'll be one who will end up getting a nice going down a handicap route rather than the graded route. I would imagine those connections have got their eyes set on some of the graded races later in the season, but I would just have a slight concern that maybe he'd be a bit free if he was in a small field. But other than that, I think he's a really high class prospect for hurdles. And as I say, I think he probably should have won that grade 2 at Aintree. And over 2 miles, he'd be one I'd be following over hurdles.
Okay. I'm going to mention a horse that you just mentioned I'm going to mention. But before I do, we'd love to hear who you like for the new novice hurdling season. Who are you interested in? Who do you think is going to dominate? Is there any of these horses that you're interested in betting on for Cheltenham? Let us know in the comments section below, or you can tweet us at X, at Radio Emmet, at Final Furlong Pod. But certainly the comments section on YouTube, we want to hear from you. Who are you excited about seeing in the novice hurdling division this season? And do you like horses to follow lists? I think these can be very informative. Doesn't mean you have to bet on them in every single race, but it can give you an idea of who the leading horses are going to be for the new season, and you can then frame your races around those horses as the season goes on. So let us know who you're looking forward to in the novice hurdling season this season in the comment section below on YouTube. And if you're listening on the podcast, thank you. Check out the YouTube channel as well. Kingston Pride is the horse that I really like for this season. Paul, you've been to Nicky Henderson's yard. Did you pick up any kind of a vibe about him? Because I know he's a horse that you like as well. Paid advertisement from BetterHelp Therapy Online. What are your self-care non-negotiables? Maybe you never skip leg day or therapy day. When your schedule is packed with kids' activities, big work projects, and more, it's easy to let your priorities slip. Even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you've no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. If you've ever been in therapy, then like me, you know how beneficial it can be. But it's not just for those who've experienced major trauma. It's helpful for learning positive coping skills and setting boundaries. Therapy empowers you to be the best version of yourself. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a registered therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. With almost 5,000 therapists in the UK already, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a wide variety of expertise. Visit betterhelp.com/furlong today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/furlong. This is a paid advertisement by BetterHelp. Give online therapy a try at betterhelp.com/furlong to get 10% off your first month and get on your way to being your best self.
Yeah, I do like him. I just thought he probably travelled slightly better than Tripoli Flyer at Lingfield, and maybe just done a bit too much through the race. That was his first start for his current connections. Obviously, his point-to-point defeat of the Enabler reads quite well. Certainly did in bumpers anyway. And then he came out, and he was actually an on-runner, wasn't he, in the champion bumper?
Well, he had to be, because Nicky's horses were garbage.
Yeah. So, but the fact that he was declared suggests that he is held in fairly high regard. Instead, he went a month later. He went to Exeter. Even though I've included him in the leading prospects of the book, I was slightly underwhelmed with him at Exeter. I thought he would have probably won a little bit easy. We did travel well enough, and I think he looked like a horse who would probably mature again for another summer. Still looked a bit immature, I thought, last year, considering he come through the point-to-point ranks. But just given the way he travelled through his races again, I would think he'd be one that'll start at the minimum trip again, like Tripoli Flyer. It might be that they come head-to-head again at some stage during the season. It certainly wouldn't be a surprise anyway. I think the owner actually should say that Ollie Harris, I think he's got a strong team of horses. Seems that a lot of his horses are now trained in 7 Barrows, and we've seen In the Air switch and bolt up at Southall last week. I was there that day, won in an absolute cancer. He runs again at Exeter this afternoon. I think he's got a strong team. He's obviously got Peaky Boyle be going, Novice chasing. Manila Premier is one I'd be really excited about. Thought he was perhaps a bit obvious to include, having cost a lot of money out of his point-to-point, but an owner who seems to be building up a strong team of horses and an even stronger association with Nicky Henderson.
We're kind of here again, because this time last year, Willmanboy was one of the most exciting novice hurdling prospects, and loads of people were excited about him and expecting big things, and it just didn't quite happen. Now, it's possible that I'm falling for another one, but I don't think so. I think this fella's good. And this is a good horse.
I think Willmans will bounce back. He obviously had his issues. He bolted up, didn't he, first time? He'd won his 2 bumpers for Neil Mulholland. Bolted up at Newbury first time out, and then he went back there for the Challow. And obviously things where he wasn't right on the day.
Yeah, it was too much too soon.
Too bad to be true. So wouldn't at all be a shock to see him bounce back, whether that's in handicap hurdles or whether he's sent chasing. I don't know, but he's another horse who I like. Readers of the book will remember from when he won his point to point. So certainly wouldn't be one you'd be giving up on at this stage.
No, but I think it does bear repeating. You need to remember what was happening last year in the context of what's going to happen this season. Yeah. So Jericho de Repene comes out and wins on debut. He was well talked up. And what happens? Unibet go 3-1 for the Supreme Novice Hurdle. I mean, that's just absolutely ridiculous. Because if they all start deciding, do you know what, we can get away with this. We can just start pricing up any old Nicky Henderson token horses at 3-1 shop for the Supreme. That's joke shop stuff. That's anti-post betting is already considered to be dead, but that's completely dead then. And that didn't exactly work out too well. And it was a similar thing with Willmanboy. You were then being made to think that, if he's 3-1, then Willmanboy at 10-1 for the Supreme must be a great price. And no, it wasn't. And obviously things didn't pan out that way anyway. So this fella could come out and bolt up. Hold mad tough. We don't know what his ideal trip is going to be, and we don't even know if he's going to be good enough. But I think he will be. You can take a look at his form. Now, the Jeff Banks team must think I'm nuts because they're 66-1 for the Supreme. They're 40-1 for the Bering Bingham or the Gallagher or whatever it's being. We should turn this race into a handicap. Jesus Christ, do not do that. That's absolute insanity. Why would you suggest that? That's the race that produced Isterbrack, Hardy Eustace, Faugheen, the new one, Ballyburn. Turn it into a... Do you think owners want handicap? No, they want Grade 1 winners. My goodness. Anyway, that was a listed race he was beaten on debut. I know it's an all-weather bumper, and it's also one of the most valuable bumpers run in the UK. It was worth 15 grand more than most of them. I think he just didn't quite have the turn of foot that Fergal's horse had. His next start, I get where you're saying. Maybe he wasn't as impressive as you would have liked, but James Bone never touched him.
No. And again, it's probably worth bearing in mind that obviously it could have been that he was one of the sick horses or anything. We don't know what
I'd say almost certainly.
Nicky, so yeah, again, I would expect him to develop into a smart novice hurdler.
Yeah,
I think Nicky just obviously digressing later. I think he's got he's another trainer with a really strong team of novice chasers as well this season. So don't be surprised to see him bounce right back and have a much improved season this year.
This is going to be a big season for Nicky. This is going to be a really big season for Nicky. But I would almost forgive any horse that ran for Nicky Henderson towards the end of last season, even those that were winning, because they might have been winning in spite of the circumstances. He's from the family of Trebalgan. He's bred to stay. I think there is a turn of foot there. I'd imagine it's going to be the 2.5 mile division, but he might start over 2. This is exactly the kind of horse Nicky Henderson excels with. I don't know how Nicky does it. Whatever way he conditions his horses, whatever way he trains them at Seven Barrows, he can inject pace into them. Even those that have stamina, he's able to get them to perform with more speed, particularly over hurdles. So I think this guy's going to be a big player this season. That 40-1 with Jeff Banks bet could look very, very silly. So he's one of the ones that I'm interested in. I haven't backed him, but I'm very, very interested in him for the new season. Kingston Pride is my latest one. Right, your next one is Weighed Out.
Yeah, Ollie Murphy's got it again. He probably had a good team of bump horses last year. We just touched on Castle Ivers, who ran behind those 2 horses at Lingfield and then came out and absolutely bolted up in soft ground. At Weatherby, EB1, Woodland Park would be another one, a giant of a horse who won on his second start at Market Raising. Probably a long-term prospect. Woodland's out. Whereas Weighed Out, I think, is more of a compact individual, so that's why I've gone with him. I think he might be more of a horse who's ready for the here and now. He'd impressed when he won his point-to-point, despite not being an overly huge son of Shantou. He won it fairly impressively first time out, and then he was sent off at odds-on favouritism for a bumper at the Market Raising, which he won in decisive fashion. Looks an uncomplicated individual, and Sean says as much that in the book. And for all that we are suckers for these strong travelling horses, the trainers and jockeys like the horses who turn up and are pretty uncomplicated on a daily basis at home. So seems to do everything right on that occasion. The placed horses came out and won bumpers subsequently. Slightly disappointing to see Ace of Spades actually was runner-up, well beaten on his hurdles debut at Utox last weekend, but I'd imagine he would come on for that run. And wouldn't be too perturbed by that. So, weighed out. Again, I think he could be quick enough to start over 2, but I think before too long he'll want 2.5. And just with him being quite uncomplicated and as I say, he looks ready-made for hurdles rather than thinking he's a future chaser down the line. He could be just one that is campaigned a little bit more aggressively this year, and we might see him stepped up in class if all goes well on debut.
Okay, weighed out. Mine is blindingly obvious. Salvator Mundi. I mean, aside from the fact that he makes his debut in the Triumph Hurdle and he doesn't, it's all right. It's an okay performance, but the fact is, it was his hurdling debut for Willie Mullins. Only his second start over hurdles. It's the form with Sergino that everyone was talking about. That's why he was a single-figure price for the Triumph at one stage, and there was rumours that Paul Townend was going to ride him. I don't know if any of that was true, but the fact that it was even being talked about by the people it was being talked about is certainly interesting. He has had a second start, and he was in the winner's enclosure getting his photograph taken when the rest of them were crossing the line. It was just ridiculous. He beat Trees that day. I don't care. He won by 62 lengths. It was absolutely outrageous what he did. He should be a leading player this season, and I think he's being dangerously underestimated in the market. Jeff Banks better going 25s for the Supreme. Again, this is a proceed with caution thing. He should be able to make the grade in graded races, given that Sergino form and given the reputation that he had last season. You'd have to imagine he's going to be a major player for Cheltenham. And if he is, the Supreme would be the most obvious race for him. It could very well be. There is stamina in the pedigree. It could very well be that actually the 2.5 is going to suit him better. But he just remains a very, very exciting prospect. He was eased down at Tipperary. Eased down! And he wins by 62 lengths. It might very well have been asthmatic horses like me galloping in the background. But still, that's ridiculous. And the clock was pretty good that day too. Salvator Mundi, I mean, I think that's just an easy game. And he will be winning graded races this season. And he should be just a case of put it down and pick it up job, I would imagine. One that Tom Malone was talking about, a Tutti Quanti, is your next horse.
Yeah, so the first 5 were definite novice hurdlers who I think could make the grade. And then my next 5 have gone slightly darker. Tutti Quanti, again, like Salvator Mundi, had one run in France, and I've only seen him once last season, for Paul Nicholls. He ran early January at Taunton, where he tanked through the race, actually 2 out, and he took it up. He looked like he was going to win. Despite being a 4-year-old, he was taking on older horse in an open novice hurdle. He was beaten by a filly, a well-bred filly of Nicky Henderson, JP McManus, is called Joyce. We didn't get to see her again, but the third-placed horse into the park won his next 2 starts. And I'd say he'd probably have a live each-way chance in the Silver Trophy on Saturday. He reappears there off a mark of 125. Tutti Quanti himself has been given a mark of 125. I think it was probably a blessing in disguise that he didn't get to win a juvenile hurdle later on in the season, because he obviously remains a novice for the full season. Whether that mark of 125 ends up being used or utilised with a couple more runs under his belt remains to be seen, or whether he develops into a graded class novice. But I'd be surprised if he wasn't good enough to win at least a couple of novice hurdles, and then we can take a view from there. I haven't seen him in Paul's because he's a huge horse for a 4-year-old, so possibly again the fact that he does remain a novice is probably a bit of a blessing. He'd probably be a chaser down the line, but I say this should certainly be a couple of hurdle races to be won with him this year.
To be honest about it, I don't think I can tell you any more than Tom Malone did, but the way he was speaking about Talk to the Man, and I was talking to Paul beforehand, very, very briefly, and the stuff that he's heard, copy, paste, put it out there. I think we should all be talking to the man. This is going to be a big horse to follow for the season. Do you want to give any specific reason as to why? Because I think I should just point everybody in the direction of what Tom was saying and leave it all to him. And that way, if the horse doesn't quite make it, we can all blame Tom Malone.
Yeah, I found it fascinating listening to Tom speak on the show last week. But he said he clearly heard about the horse and they were watching him. Didn't he say it was the same day, it's the final day of the season at Sandown, and they were watching on the phone or something in the car park? So he'd obviously heard beforehand that Talk to the Man was a promising individual from Ireland. And if you watch his point-to-point back, despite making a mistake, I think it was 2 out, he just powered through the line and won with any amount in hand. And he was probably actually one of the later horses I included in the point-to-point section of the book. But as soon as I seen him, I knew I had to include him. Such was the impression that he created. On the dam side, I think his dam's a full sister to Lord Windermere, Gold Cup winner, so plenty of stamina in the pedigree. So once he does go hurdling, which I assume will be next season, listening to the plans that will be staying in the bumpers this year, but when he does go hurdling, he probably want a bit of a trip in time. But yeah, and in terms of physical impression, when I was down there, say, Regent Stroll was probably the nicest 4-year-old I've seen last year. There was a couple of others, a horse called 2K, probably a dark horse, another name to note, who won his bumper at Sandown. Physically, those two stood out this year. I know he's slightly different in that he'd run the point to point, but physically talk to the man was like, out of the new horses in Paul's yard or the unraced ones, he was the one that stood out to me. Of all the horses I saw, just carried himself and had a bit of a presence about him, and just looked like he had a touch of class about him. So yeah, wasn't surprised at all to hear Tom speak highly of him. Seems to be a horse on everyone's lips at the moment. I had Paul on his first season preview talking him up the other day as well. So hopefully he delivers and he will win a bumper first time out. And then I think the plan, by the sounds of it, will be to save him for the valuable bumper at Newbury in March, where he will run in the race that Regent Stroll won this year.
I think another one who's very exciting is Wingmen for Gordon Elliott and Bective Stud. I really liked this performance at the Punchestown Festival. It's the same bumper that's been won by Yorkhill, Dysart Dynamo, and last year's 1, 2, 3 was Ballyburn, Dancing City, and Slade Steel. So this is a bumper that we should be really paying attention to, and the fact that it went to Gordon and not Willie, I think is quite interesting. He ran on a hood again that day, seemed to appreciate the better ground, seemed to really appreciate a positive ride. I'd expect those kind of tactics to be applied back over hurdles, and he's definitely a horse to be looking forward to this season. That bumper has obviously produced 3 multiple Grade 1 winners last season.
I think the second from that race, Queensbury Boy for Harry Derham's probably another one to note. Obviously carries the colours of David Maxwell, so will have the amateur rider on board when he goes hurdling, but he'd won pretty impressively at Chepstow over Christmas, and at point-to-point form that tied him with Kopek, who obviously a bit more of a talking horse coming from Paul Nicholls' yard. And I think Queensbury Boy will be one due to his connections who might go under the radar slightly.
Just going through some of the horses for the last few days, Harry Derham's going to have a big season.
Yeah, well, last year was his first full season, if I remember correctly. He was started halfway through the previous season with having a winner with his first runner on Boxing Day of, that must have been 2022. And he had obviously had the second half and then first full season last year. And then now, yeah, as you say, what did he say? He coveted second album is tougher than the first. But he's got a
sophomore album, as the Yanks would say.
Yeah, he's got a strong team to go to war with, and I think he is very much one of the horses you would be looking forward to.
I think he's just blindly one of the trainers you should be following as well.
Yeah, he is. He's done well with horses that move the younger horses. Another bumper horse that ran in a listed race I touched on earlier. I think he thinks quite a lot of a horse called Noah's Great Rainbow. I think he's one he acquired when Oliver Sherwood joined the team. So yeah, he's got plenty of strength and depth from handicappers right through, and I say continue to bring them young ones through. But Queensbury Boy would be one, and Wingmen as well would be it'd certainly be a horse, and it'd be interesting to see how that form works out. Port Julian I thought was disappointing in the race. Obviously bombed out on the back of having looked really good in his point to point and having won that point to point bumper at Garran that tends to work out. Particularly well, we've seen some good horses win that over the years. I think 3 of the past 11 or 12 winners won it and then went on to win the Neptune or Ballymore, whatever it will be this year, the Birmingham. So
the Paul Ferguson horses to follow Grade 1 novice hurdle at Cheltenham.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, never make this a handicap hurdle at Cheltenham. Novices hurdle, Grade 1.
Yeah, let's give it the real name, the Birmingham. But yeah, again, so I'll be with you there. Yeah, I think Wingman, if he learns to settle, should develop into a top novice hurdle.
Yeah, I quite like the fact that he was like Limestone Lad-esque, just goes out, galloped them all into submission, and I'd expect that.
I think on his second start, I think Harry Swan tried to fight with him a little bit, didn't he? But he kind of just let him roll the punches down, and maybe that's the way they'll go forward. Maybe he'll be campaigned over 2 to begin with and given a forward going ride, maybe. Yeah,
it was in my head that they might do something similar that they did with Firefox, like take him to Ferryhouse for that good novice hurdle to begin with, which he beat Ballyburn in, and then just maybe keep him to 2 miles. But I don't think there'd be any issue with going further with him. I think he's a really, really exciting prospect this season. I'm very, very interested to see. Gordon's got a really strong team of novice hurdlers. I don't know if you know this, but that Gordon Elliott, he can train a horse, and it turns out he's got some very exciting novice hurdle prospects for the new season as well. But I think he's very much up there, Wingman, and I'm looking forward to seeing him in action. Your next horse is Derryhassen Paddy.
Yeah, I include this in my dark horses section, but I don't know whether you can be classed as that. I haven't won a point and a bumper, but still, I would think that some viewers might not have heard of him. He was pretty impressive when he beat a horse off Gigginstown in his point called Master Boy Davis. And I think that point form is probably stronger than the bumper form of his air success. But it was the way he went through the race on his first start for Lucinda Russell. He bounced out and made all. It was only a 6-runner bumper at air on heavy ground, but he travelled really well, enthusiastically, and put the opposition to the sword. I say that form wouldn't amount to much. His stablemate back in third ran over hurdles recently at Perth and is rated only 100. So, but I think Derryhassen Paddy was in a completely different league to the opposition. And again, in terms of physicality, he was a horse who stood out when I went up to Lucinda's recently when I was up at Perth. And he was one I was really looking forward to seeing. He was actually entered to make his hurdles debut over 2 miles at Hexham on Saturday, but he hasn't been declared. I thought he'd probably won a trip, but I suppose on a test and track on soft ground, he'll be all right to begin with, especially up north, because he'd probably be a horse with a class edge over some of the opposition to begin with. And I would be disappointed if he couldn't rack up a nice little sequence of wins in the north.
Okay, I'm going to keep this pretty short and sweet. Teeshan is just blindingly obvious, but he seems like he's been forgotten because he committed the horrific crime of having a massive reputation, going for the champion bumper and being absolutely obliterated. How dare he? Oh, he's a con job. Oh, it's complete beat spoofer of a horse. Oh, he's no good. He's had the head blown off him. I wouldn't mind that performance at all. I think there's a couple of interesting things about that. Ella McNeil was very excited about Kopek and drove something like 17 hours to get to Exeter for his hurdling debut, and then 17 hours back. So they were obviously very confident that he was going to go and win, and he did, and they like that horse a lot, and yet Harry chose Teeshan. Now, maybe there's a Johnny Delahaye angle there, because if the Bravemansgame situation showed us anything last season, it's that Johnny Delahaye really wants to have Harry Cobden on board his horses, even if the stable star is going running in the big Grade 1, sponsored by the bookmaker who sponsors the yard. But irrespective of that, Kopek would have been a very interesting horse to ride, and yet Harry chose Teeshan. He was a wildly impressive winner of his point-to-point, wildly impressive winner of his bumper, held in very, very high regard. Tom really talked him up, and there was no ounce of the faith in this horse being shaken whatsoever. We've seen many horses have the head blown off them in the champion bumper. It's just a little bit too much for them, and they still go on to be very, very good horses. The horse Emma Nagle bred, Brighter Days Ahead, good example of that. Was a no-show in the champion bumper, is now a Cheltenham Festival winner. I think this fellow is going to be a proper novice hurdler. Your next one is the Blue Room.
Yeah, this is a point-to-point recruit who is now in training with Ollie Murphy, Order of St. George 4-year-old. He was actually beaten. He finished runner-up in his drama point-to-point, but he caught the eye with the way he moved through the field. He was travelling quite easily and moved from 5th into 2nd, and a mistake at the last. I don't think it made any difference to the result, but probably would have finished a little bit closer. Just really liked the way he went through the race. I've seen him a couple of times in the yard. Looks a nice sort. Again, one Ollie describes as being uncomplicated. I think he quite likes that sire, Order of St. George. He's been bought by Bective Stud, so he'll carry the silks of Noel and Valerie Moran. And being only a 4-year-old, I think he'll go down the bumper route to begin with. And I'd be disappointed if he wasn't able to win a bumper this season.
My final one is Factual Fact, who we haven't seen since March of last year, 2023. So I'm taking a chance on this fella, but he was really impressive in a 4-year-old bumper at Thurles. An 8th length winner, he's a gelding by authorised. I'm going to guess he didn't have a setback. They just decided, a little bit similar to another Rob Corr horse, Heartwood. Really nice debut, and then they gave him a full year off to strengthen up physically and mentally. This fella's a young horse. He's only a 5-year-old now. I think they might have done something similar with him. Factual Fact has a big reputation. I think that was a really impressive performance at Thurles, and I'd be expecting pretty decent things from this horse this season, and he could be one that slips under the radar. I think he's going to be a very interesting one to follow as the season goes on. Your next horse, Paul Ferguson, is My Noble Lord.
It is, and he runs on Saturday. Actually, he makes it hurdler. Unusual for me to be looking towards a juvenile hurdler. Maybe certainly one that hasn't come from France, but he's an ex-recruit from the flat. Won 4 times from 5 starts over middle distances for Michael Bell. earlier this season. Handles deep ground, looks like he's got a really good attitude, which is probably what enabled him to climb through the handicap. He was only winning by short distances, but I really liked his attitude. Handles soft ground, stays well, so ticks plenty of boxes in terms of his profile for the juvenile hurdle campaign. Since joined Oliver Greenall and Josh Guerrero, who are a training duo, I think are very much on the up. And he has been bought by JB McManus, who obviously those guys teamed together to win the Martin Pipe a couple of years ago with a Rocco. I was over at the yard recently, and if you've seen this horse, he doesn't look like a 3-year-old who's come off the flat. He does look like there's plenty of size and scope about him. He reports to have schooled well, so he was just one I would be excited about maybe, but in early season juvenile hurdles, because I do think he looks like he needs a bit of cut in the ground. So interestingly, he starts off at Chepstow on Saturday with John Joe O'Neill on board. So if all goes well there, maybe something like the Wensleydale could be an early target back at Weatherby, but not sure how high he can scale, but just haven't seen him again physically. He was one who impressed me and certainly got the attitude in his flat racing to take to the new discipline.
Okay, and the other horse that you've got on the list is Kap Ouest.
Yeah, another Kap Ouest. I think it's West you pronounce it, but it's as you say, as you can see on the screen, spelled U-O-U. Sorry, rather than
it's O, not Q. I read Q.
No, Kap Ouest.
People are typing it into their Racing Post trackers, going, "What's he talking about? Who's this Kap Ouest? Kap. How do you do that then? Kap Ouest?
I think it's Kap Ouest. West.
Okay.
O-U in French is W, isn't it? So,
yeah, of course. Well, you know me and my French. I mean, I'm such an expert.
Not that I'm wanting to normally butcher a pronunciation, but that's what I'll go with anyway. He actually came out of the same Chepstow bumper at the start of last season, last autumn, as Tripoli Flyer. He finished a couple of places in front of him. Fourth that day was It Seems Like It, who bolted up in a Foss last maiden hurdle. And it's probably another name to know from that race, actually, for David Pipe. He's a huge individual when it was down at his yard. We didn't see him in the second half of the season. So, again, I think that bumper will work out well. But Kap Ouest was ridden with restraint on that occasion, because I think he looked like quite a headstrong individual. We didn't see him then for 186 days, and he made his hurdles debut just after the turn of the new season in what was a decent maiden hurdle at Uttoxeter for the time of year. And he split Valgrand, who had finished fourth in the Aintree bumper. A horse called Came From Nowhere, who's trained by Jeremy Scott and looked quite impressive when he won a bumper at Taunton earlier in the season. So, again, he pulled quite hard and he wore a hood on that occasion. So it might be that he just takes a couple of runs to settle down, maybe. But I think he's definitely got talent, and now he's travelled through his races, and there will be races to be won with him at some stage. I think the way he's ridden at the minute, and the way he pulls through his race, I think he'll be kept at the minimum trip. Possibly, if he doesn't win next time, maybe he's one to see what handicap mark he's given, and he will improve once he enters handicap company.
A half-brother to Bravemansgame, who's in training with Willie Mullins, who won a point-to-point by 40 lengths, was purchased by ex-jockey David Mullins, and then has been bought by JP McManus. Yes, please. Absolutely. Quantum Boy. He's surely a solid moral to go and win a bumper. Hopefully some big owner, one of the other big trainers in Ireland, is going to have something in there that's well talked up and we can get a bit of a price about him, but it should be at least decent. Bumper should be a certainty. I need to clarify something though with Paul Ferguson, because we had a big debate about this last year and I'm still not sure what the rules are. Can 6-year-olds run in the champion bumper?
Yeah, they can, yeah. It was like the start of last season, it wasn't really clear, but they can't run. 6-year-olds can't run in the first half of the season, so they can't run in bumpers in Britain between now until after the turn of the year. So 6-year-olds aren't eligible to run in bumpers like through November and December. Then they will be.
Explain this to me like I'm a child. Explain this to me like I'm a child. Factophile was 6 when he ran the champion bumper. Could Factophile run in this season's champion bumper?
Yeah, he could, yeah, but he wouldn't have been able to run in Britain if he was 6, 10 and 7. So you can't run during the first half of the season as a 6-year-old. You can as a 5-year-old and then be a 6-year-old in the new year. But you couldn't run a 6-year-old now in a bumper in England.
Okay, all right. So just to explain this to me like I'm a US senator. He's 5 turning 6, so he can run. If he was 6 turning 7, he couldn't.
Yeah. So if you are age 6 now, you can't run in a bumper.
But then what was the whole big thing about then?
No, because they said when it was announced at the end of the previous season, 6-year-olds will be ruled out of bumper. It was just the way it was worded. It wasn't very clear. I thought I interpreted it incorrectly that it was the 6-year-olds were ruled out for the whole season, but it's not. It was during the first half. So basically, they're saying if you're 5 during the first half of the season, you're right to run as 6-year-old.
Hold on a second. We had a big row about this on the show. We had people DMing us. We had emails from people going, "What are you talking about? 6-year-olds can run the bumper." And I was like, "No, Paul says they can't." And it turns out the whole thing was concocted by the BHA because they didn't word it properly. And by the way, does 7-year-olds ever run in the champion bumper? I don't remember that happening.
No, they were never allowed in England. They were allowed in...
Why did they make such a thing about it?
I don't know. Okay, I think it was more for the first half of the campaign. So basically, if you had a 6-year-old, just crack on, you need to go hurdling, which most people would do anyway. The one thing I'd say with Quantum Boy, sorry, going back to him, is looking at his pedigree, he's by Diamond Boy and out of a nickname, isn't he? So I would say he probably would want deep ground. Certainly soft or heavy. So maybe he's one for the middle of the winter and maybe Leopardstown at Christmas or something.
Well, Derek O'Connor rode him...
When he will be 5 and then he'll be 6 shortly after, obviously.
Yeah, Derek O'Connor rode him to victory, and it's in another book, which is excellent. Mark Howard's One Jump Ahead.
My copy of Mark Howard's book arrived yesterday, actually. So
there you go, you see.
We exchange, Mark and I exchange books.
Mark's excellent.
Respect for one another.
Mark's excellent. He does. Obviously, the only one to buy is the Paul Ferguson Jumpers to Follow, available now at weatherbyshop.co.uk. Use the promo code FFJTF2425 to get £3 off your copy. But Mark Howard's One Jump Ahead is absolutely superb. And there's a quote, Derek O'Connor, who was on board that 40-length win that day. He did what we thought he would do, a very exciting horse for the future. He was going easy everywhere and he jumped well. I'm just relieved and thrilled. This is a proper horse. And Mark Howard does some great work, so make sure you support Mark as well. What do you think they're going to do with him? So he would be eligible for the champion bumper. Do you think they'll go that route with him?
I don't know, just with his pedigree. I wouldn't. That's not normally Willie's way. It wouldn't surprise me if he maybe went hurdling. But if he does go down the bumper route, obviously, I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe they would look to capitalise a bit earlier in the season, because just looking at that pedigree, I'd just be a bit concerned there. I say the last couple of Cheltenham festivals have been soft ground sitting on a Wednesday anyway, so that wouldn't be an issue. But if you got better ground in the spring, it'd just be something. You might well be handled it, but just purely on pedigree, you would think that you would want a good bit of cut in the ground at least. Yeah,
it's a very different pedigree to Fact to File, but I still think it's really interesting that they decided to go down the bumper route with him. And I'm pretty certain the only reason that A Dream to Share was bought is because they knew how good Fact to File is, and that's something I was saying at the time. Yeah, that they knew. And of all the Willie Mullins horses running in that champion bumper, Patrick elects to ride Fact to File. And now we know how good he is. So I'd be really interested to know what they're going to do with Quantum Boy. Hurdling is the thing that makes sense, but if they do go down the bumper route with him, doesn't mean there won't be something else that emerges that's too good for him, but it's something to very much bear in mind. If they go the bumper route with him, there's a specific reason for that. And he might be really, really good. Quantum Boy, definitely want to be checking out, certainly with that pedigree. By the way, I was just going down through the list of horses in training. Did you see that Professor Caroline Tisdale and Brian Drew have got horses with Willie Mullins now?
Yeah, I did notice that, yeah.
Two of the leading British owners who always support David Pipe and Paul Nicholls have decided we'll join that Willie Mullins bandwagon as well. What can you say?
What are you going to do?
By the way, David's got some really good horses for the new season, but it's interesting.
Yeah, he's got a nice novice head. Last week probably could have been included, called Durancon. I think I was just checking the entries before we came on. It looked like he was being given an entry at Worcester next week. I thought he'd be a stayer, but it looks like he's been entered over 2 miles at Worcester. So, want to keep an eye on maybe next week. But I think he will be stepping up in distance sooner rather than later. But he was a good bumper horse. Carries the Brocade Racing Silks and should develop into a nice novice hurdler this season. Yeah, he's got some nice prospects to come through. Some nice young Irish point-to-pointers coming through as well, including one that Tom Malone sourced for him. I'm excited to see what David Pipe can do this season. I think it's going to be a very good season for David, hopefully.
And hopefully we'll be talking to him on the show very, very soon. On the Champion Bumper, you're a little bit skeptical about the form of it overall. So I obviously want the form to be good with the yellow clay. But of the front three, particularly the front two, Romeo Coolio and Jasmine DeVoe, which of those two would you be more interested in for the new season?
The two placed horses, I'd say. With the two, I keenest to take out the front bunch. Romeo Coolio, again, he was entered on Saturday, but hasn't been declared, I don't think. And Jalan Duderi, I think he was the really solid bumper horse last year. So maybe if you're marking the Champion Bumper around him, you would say that it could be a good race. The front two, say, I've got utmost respect for the winner, but just physically, he wasn't too imposing in the paddock beforehand. I think Romeo Coolio travelled like potentially the best horse and the speediest horse in the race, so I'd be interested in him over a minimum trip. Jalan Duderi is earlier in the season as well, shaped like a horse who might want a longer distance over hurdles. So it'd be those two going separate ways in terms of trip-wise for me out of the front few. And I've already touched upon, obviously, Bill Joyce was one I thought would come out of the race and win. Another one who finished mid-division, a horse called Union Avenue, trained by Jimmy Moffat. So obviously one who'll probably be campaigned up north. He'd won at Aintree on Boxing Day last year under a penalty. You would like to think that in finishing mid-division, even if it's an ordinary Weatherbys Champion Bumper, you would think that would be good enough form to enable him to win at least a couple of novice hurdles in the north.
What do you think about Emmet Mullins' horse, who won at the Dublin Racing Festival and would have been a big player at Cheltenham, Gerbo Damache?
Yeah, he was really impressive. Yeah, I think there hasn't been too many updates about him recently. So whether I know there was a slightly downbeat one recently, I heard. So hopefully that he does make it back to the track sooner rather than later, because I thought that visually and probably in terms of form as well, that was probably the best pick of the bumper form last year, Gerbo Damache at the DRF. So yeah, he did look good, and I think he was worthy of being promoted to favouritism for the Champion Bumper as an immediate effect of that performance. And we've seen time and time again the form of that grade 2 from Leopardstown often goes on to work out well at Cheltenham. So yeah, he'd be definitely one, but I thought he was slightly too obvious to include in this show today.
Yeah, me too, but I was a little bit worried about that lack of updates, but also the kind of you just be slightly concerned. How the hell does Paul Byrne do it? Everything that man touches. Fair
play to him. Like we've seen time and time again, and the campaigning of them's I find fascinating sometimes as well. They're not afraid to be bold, are they, with where they place the horses? So.
Well, I mean, in all fairness, you get Corbett's Cross from like very, very talented horse people, and you make his debut over 2 miles, and he goes and wins, and beats Found a 50 in the process when he's a 3 miler.
Yeah,
just extraordinary.
Well, he's even further than the 3 miler, isn't he? Now, as he showed last year. So
yeah.
Bags of stamina. Yeah, fair play to them. Utmost respect to him and Emmet.
Oh, thank you. No, it's remarkable stuff. It really is. Hey, by the way, we got a cameo appearance. Ross Millar! Racing TV's Ross Millar's in the house. Hey, Ross.
How you doing, guys? All right?
Yeah,
Ross, you all right?
In good form, thankfully. You're just catching the tail end of our conversation with Paul before we bid him farewell for the afternoon. Just on the Champion Bumper, Paul's slightly, not skeptical, just a little bit approaching it with caution. What is your take on the Champion Bumper form?
I'd agree. I caught the tail end of it. I caught in just as you were talking about CIA and gangster rap.
I was like...
I'm trying to work out, does that get left in because the YouTube AI can sometimes just go, oh, you're talking about this stuff, we'll just like suppress this, so maybe that stays in, maybe not.
Dimension.
If you're watching this and you're now going, wait, what the hell are they talking about? It might be that Trish took it out. It might be that you're fully aware. I'm not sure what she decides to do. We'll leave it to it.
It's a good way of making sure I watch and see whether it gets left in or out. I'd agree. I'd be slightly skeptical of the bumper form, and I think over the years, I mean, obviously last year, maybe the year before, the form was really solid, wasn't it? But take the general view. Actually, if you opposed Champion Bumper form across the level, over hurdles, you wouldn't always be out of pocket, I don't think. I think it can be an overinflated line of form because very often the real wise guys don't run their horses there because they think it's a race that can bottom out. There's a reason they think that. So yeah, Union Avenue, I'd agree. I think he certainly should run up a sequence up north. And I think you'll find there might be a couple that miss Cheltenham, might be the ones to follow on. And I quite like that because I think you can find horses that haven't perhaps done it in bumpers that physically are going to improve for a hurdle. I absolutely take on board what Paul said about the winner. I thought he was I mean, you wouldn't want to say it, but he was a bit of a ratty looking thing, just not much to him at all. I'm a bit of a sucker for a decent sized horse, but I should say they come in all shapes and sizes. But yeah, I'd be with Paul on that. I don't think it's a form line I'm going to go mad on this year.
Yeah, Patrick was making that point.
I didn't go mad on the form line last year either, and it was to my detriment early on in the season. I posed a few that clearly were very good.
I guess it depends on which way you decide to play it. Like if you had taken on the Facile Vega form, it ends up ultimately working out well for you, but in the middle it wasn't. But if you were taking on Gordon's horse, American Mike, if you were taking on him initially, you're in clover. He's just a very, very in and out horse. We can all go back through the list of superstar horses who've done very, very well from the champion bumper and then gone on and dominated. And there was the 2002, 2003 bumper with Back in Front that all those really good horses from India, Hardy Eustace and the rest of them that all came out and did really, really well afterwards. But it's every now and again you'll get a Cork All-Star and a Dunguib that look like they're going to be superstars and it just doesn't quite work out. So we have to bear in mind there's going to be a lot of horses coming from where you are right now, Ross, in France, that we don't know anything about really. And a lot of horses that will be coming from the point-to-point circuit that we also don't know a whole lot about yet either. So it's not all on the track just yet.
Absolutely. And I think the one thing I'd point out is that the more that the point-to-point filters into to the bumper scene, and it's definitely changing in the last 3 to 4 years, you're going to get a slight change in bumpers. In that, I was always told that sort of slow stayers win bumpers. I think that's slightly changing. The horses that are coming into bumpers from point to points, they're more prepared. They've done more speed work because the Irish point to points, they run over 3 miles, but they tend to race over a mile and a bit. So you tend to get perhaps a few more pacier types coming into the bumpers. So bumpers are something I'll always have a punt in a bumper if I go on track and close my book, close my phone, and just use my eye. But very rarely do I want to get involved just on a form line or a market mover, so to speak.
Yeah, they can be tricky, to say the least. Literally, they're big babies running in those races. If you had one question for Paul Ferguson before he heads off, what would it be?
Oh, that's throwing me a curveball, isn't it? Well, I know he's involved in the yard, so he might not answer. But an Ollie Murphy horse that didn't win last year, Paul, that you think can step forward this year?
In Diva Blue, I'd say he was one who held in high regard last year. Obviously, he was really impressive. When he won his bumper, I was there that day at Weatherby because we had Go Dante running. He won the handicap hurdle, so he was pretty impressive that day. I think they were pretty shell shocked that he was beaten first time out. Obviously, he had a little setback, but he's back in now, and I think they don't think they've given up hope on him. When I was down there recently and we done the videos for the social media host follows, Gerard Tumulty's Ollie's assistant was quick to pick in Diva Blue again, and this time last year they were fighting over him in the yard to select him. So I think he should still develop into a good novice hurdler this year.
In Diva Blue goes straight into the Racing Post tracker or whichever website it is that you're using. You can get your copy of Paul Ferguson's Jumpers to Follow, which you really should be getting right now at weatherbyshop.co.uk, weatherbyshop.ie. Use the promo code FFJTF2425 to get £3 off your print copy, digital copy, or the print and digital bundle. That's what I have. I like having the book, but I really like being able to just search for whatever I want on the tablet. It's a fantastic read, Paul. As always, a great production. And as always, thank you for your insight on the show today. Looking forward to chatting to you as the season progresses.
Cheers, guys. See you soon.
Ross Millar came on the show, I think, late last year to talk about a horse heat sourced from Eastern Europe. This incredible story about trying to find value in the bloodstock market. And what ends up happening? Roger only goes and wins by 97 lengths. That might be a slight exaggeration, but it was an incredible start to things. And I've already seen some of the videos of him schooling in his yard, and he's looking the business already. So how are things going with all the Angle Syndicate Roger?
We're thrilled with him, Emmet. Yeah, I mean, I had a couple of people sort of message me and say, God, you didn't tell me he was going to do that on debut. And genuinely, we didn't know. I mean, hand on heart, if I'd have owned him outright, I probably would have taken him out at Stratford because it was heavy ground. I'd be very adamant, on his pedigree, on his action. He's going to be a better horse on better ground. But the guys had all travelled down. There was nothing to lose by running, and he was first race of the day, so he ran on fresh ground. But it was just really pleasing to see that a lot of elements that we tried to put into him. So we've done a lot of pole work in the Czech Republic. Richard had schooled him plenty when he arrived with him, and it was heartening that Gavin came into the paddock, having sat on him the week before, said, look, he jumps really well, there's not much pace on, I think I'm going to go and make plenty of use of him. And that was probably the winning of the race, really. He sort of had them all at it, sort of turning out, and stayed very well. So we were really pleased with that. Went to Cheltenham, and I think perhaps maybe tactics backfired, and that Gavin tried to get him to settle in a better race, and he was pretty keen throughout. But that was a decent race. We weren't disappointed. And then he went to Kempton, and I think probably in hindsight, Richard's horses, Richard has to battle the rapeseed, which is a blight of many trainers. And just sort of messaged me 5 days before and said the wind has been blowing it straight through. But we rolled the dice. We took a chance. It was going to be his last run of the season anyway. Jumped slightly left-handed at Kempton, so maybe he wants a left-handed track, and perhaps wasn't at the races. But he's got his mark. We were always pretty insistent that he was bought to go chasing. He had a month's holiday, then went to a good friend of mine, who's Michael Owen, who's a 5-star event rider. So he's been around Burley and Badminton and all the big ones. He had him for 6 weeks, worked away, did lots of different jumping exercises, focusing on making him adjustable, really, and using his feet, because I'd be adamant that people talk about it's going to make up into a better chaser, and they just talk about size and scope. And jumping to me is about the ability to link their brain and their feet and use their feet in front of a fence. So we did plenty of work on that. I think it's a skill that is learnable. Some obviously learn it quicker than others. Good reports from up there. He's gone back to Richards to delight Carl Hinch. We have to say he's bigger and stronger for a summer off. But as a 4-year-old, he does look physically. I saw him this weekend. He does look like he's strengthened up. He's working away well. He's had the equine dentist. He's had a good bit of physio. His work is stepping up. Charlie Deutsch has been in and schooled him twice at Richards over the fences. He'll go to Warwick Racecourse. They've got a good facility there where you can school over 5, maybe even 6 in a row. He'll go and do that. And then I think we're looking to go to Bangor on the 29th for a 2-mile, 1 furlong handicap chase.
And is that going to be his trip this season, do you think? Because he was running over 2 mile 4 in his second start.
Yeah, so it was 2 mile 2, wasn't it, at Stratford? I bought him thinking that 2 mile 4 would be his trip. And then Shirley Becker, Richard's significant better half, his wife, who does all the work with Roger, sort of pointed out that how easily he travelled at Cheltenham when they were going quick. So he's perhaps a horse that we can look to keep at 2 miles until we sort of feel we need to step up. But I'd be disappointed if he didn't stay 2 mile 4 in time. But of course, a lot of that depends about finding a rhythm over the fences and breathing properly and and all that sort of thing. But yeah, I think he'll stay a bit further in time, but we'll start off at 2 miles and see where we go.
You could be disappointed with those two performances, the 30 length of feet and then the 71 length of feet, but the rapeseed is a real problem, and it's devastated trainers in the UK and in Ireland as well. It's amazing how many of them want to talk about it too, because I think they're desperate for something to be done, but there's just no defending against it, Ross. Can you just briefly explain how that affects horses?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm no scientist, but it's a bacteria that sits on the spore, so it's not actually the spore itself, and it effectively just lines the airways and affects their ability to get oxygen through the lining of the lung into the bloodstream and around the body. I mean, if you walk through a field of rapeseed yourself, you'll feel it, and you'll feel it on your skin, and you'll certainly feel it in your breathing. I know Jane Williams had a big problem with it last year. Richard has suffered with it for the last couple of years. I think this year, because they farm on rotation, actually, Richard this year will be okay because they're rotating it out. I know Nicky Henderson spent a significant amount of money buying the farmland either side at the top of his gallop because it was becoming a problem. It is a problem, and I think it further highlights, because I've not seen anything. Now, I'm very willing to be corrected, but I've seen nothing on a BHA website, social media site, sort of lobbying for this. And I think it suggests that it's a slightly rudderless ship. Sometimes question who the BHA are actually representing, and the continuing sort of break in the sort of rural life and those that make the rules. Ireland seem to be doing a better fist of it. I've seen a couple of pretty strong hitting marketing videos talking to point trainers, and that's a big industry in Ireland about the problems they're facing. And I think they are having conversations about, trying to find a way around it. Because of course, at the same time, you can't just tell a farmer that he can't plant a crop, because they're not doing particularly well in the current climate either. We see on Clarkson's farm, these farmers are absolutely up against it. And they've got to sow crops that they think are going to be the most profitable. So it's not simply just a case of saying, you can't grow that there, mate. There's got to be some sort of solution that works for everybody.
Isn't it amazing how it takes a major show like Clarkson's Farm, which is on Amazon Prime, which technically speaking then shouldn't be one of the biggest shows in the UK, but it absolutely is, because if you've got an Amazon account, you've pretty much got Amazon Prime anyway. But it took that show for us to understand how bad the problems are for British farmers. That's not been talked about by the BBC. It's not been talked about by ITV. They have no interest in telling you. Why is that? If we don't have farmers, we don't have food. That's a major thing.
I mean, if you think Country Fire should be the programme that does what Clarkson's Farm does, and Clarkson's Farm should be about him blowing up tractors and, driving into telegraph poles, shouldn't it? And it's not. But it then comes the same thing, that these programmes mirror life, where you seem to pander to the opposition. You try to placate the opposition and console them, rather than explaining your position. And I think racing is one of many industries that are going down that route, both in terms of betting, because of course, problem betting is a problem, and it shouldn't be dismissed. But for every one person that has a problem with betting, there are plenty of people that don't and derive an enjoyment from it and do so responsibly and all the rest of it. And yet everything is built around protecting those with a problem. And then it's the same in the racing. People that have the issue with welfare, and don't get me wrong, there's a few players in the racing industry that have really dropped the ball and dropped racing in it, and I feel pretty angry about it. But at the same time, we have to decide whether we are saying that we are a wholesome sport that values the animals, which I certainly do mine, and I think plenty of people do. But then on the other hand, we're saying that we limit the number of strikes of the stick, and yet on the other hand, we say that the stick doesn't hurt them. We have to decide what we believe, and then once we believe it, defend it and explain it to people that choose to take a sort of different view to us, and you're not going to please everybody. But I think what happens is you end up trying to pander to them, and you end up conceding too much and not being honest. And honesty is, it's in short supply in the world in general, I suppose. But I think that's the place to start from, is to be honest when you have problems, hold people accountable. And I don't just mean the rule makers, I mean the people in the industry as well, where I think that people that are deemed characters get away with breaking rules and behaving in a way that you perhaps wouldn't like, and yet people that are small and not significant to the media industry get thrown under the bus, as it seems. Now, I think if you do something wrong, you do something wrong, and you should all be treated the same. But I just think the way the media portrays the sport sometimes is not accurate, and I think that's a problem to start with.
Getting back to all the allowances syndicate, so we're going to see Roger very soon. Your ambition, Ross, what are you hoping he's going to achieve this season?
I'd like to think that, we're really happy with his run at Stratford. You'd have to be honest and say the form hasn't worked out. He's got a mark of 106. Whether he needs to come down a couple of pounds to be competitive, I'm not sure. I'd like to think that and it's different doing it. And I wrote on Twitter, I genuinely lost sleep before his first schooling session over fences. Now, part of that is because I've slightly poked my head above the parapet and said, you can buy a horse off the flat and it can go and jump a fence. And this not bred for jumping spiel is nonsense. And obviously I put a lot of my hard work into it in the Czech Republic, teaching him what I thought he needed to be taught, and then going perhaps slightly against convention, and he only had a month's holiday, and then he went and did some dressage and jumping work. So I was genuinely apprehensive that he wouldn't just go and dive into the middle of Rich's beautifully presented fences at the first instance, and he didn't. And to be fair, the feedback and brilliant feedback from Charlie Deutsch, by the way, like a 3-minute voice message to me to send on to the guys in the syndicate. This is what we did. This is what I thought. This is why he made the mistake he made the first time. He learned from the second time. This is what I think we'll do next.
Magic.
I mean, absolutely magical stuff. You can see why Venetia Williams, when she gets these hot veins of form, is so prolific, because she's getting information like that on 4 or 5 lots, 5 days a week, and then on the race course. Next time we need to go here. He wants this trip. He wants this direction. He was only. It was honestly brilliant to listen to. But both Charlie, Richard, myself from watching it, the thing that stuck out with all of us, and the videos are on my X if anyone wants to go and watch it, his footwork to the second fence, twice in a row, he shortens up. And my old boss used to say, pop, pop, at the base of the fence where they sort of with their footwork. And he was really good at that. I hope that'll stand him in good stead when he goes racing. Obviously, he's got to maintain that concentration with other horses around him. But I think he should improve for a year on his back. I think he should improve for a fence. So I'd like to think we'd end up at the season with another win to our name. We're not going to go mad this year. I mean, we still need to have a proper chat. But obviously, as you'll know, or some of your listeners might not be aware, 4-year-old get an allowance. That tapers off as they get older. So we'll try and make use of the allowance now at this part of the season. He'll probably have 3 or 4 runs, and then we'll perhaps give him a bit of a break. Richard is pretty smart on the French form book. He's got a good strike rate going to France and travelling to France. He will probably have a small team that will go to France in the spring. It might be that Roger goes there if we think it's the right thing to do. Certainly he travels well, because he came from the Czech Republic to the UK, so hopping across to France is going to be nothing for him.
Light breeze for him.
That's something he might look at. But the other thing that I was talking to this group about the other day, Richard has got, or last season had, 2 horses in his yard that were over the age of 11 and ran with real credit last year. His horses last because he trains them to last. He looks after them. I was there on Sunday, and he was tubbing a 2-year-old. So tubbing is when you stand them in some hot water with some ointment in it to try and draw a foot abscess, which is like a blister on the bottom of their foot, trying to draw it out. It wasn't one of his members of staff. It was him that was there, bent double over, holding onto a 2-year-old, trying to get it to stand in a bucket of sort of medicated water. There is no stone left unturned. His care is exceptional. He doesn't over-race them. He runs them when he thinks they're right. And he has already said, we'll build him quietly this year, but he's a horse that we want to last. It was music to my ears, because I think it would be very easy on the back of what he did last year to try and rat him through and come up with a fancy target and try and land a little pot, as the phrase would be. That's probably not what we'll do. We'll tip away quietly, keep trying to educate him, and hope that, in 7-8 years' time, I'm still talking to you about Roger lining up for the veterans finale or something. That's what I really want. And the guys on board, in the syndicate, have been fully on board so far. They've enjoyed, I think, the process. So yeah, I'd like to think we'd have another win to our name. If we could have 2 wins to our name by the end of the season, I'd be absolutely delighted.
Okay, so you've had highs, you've had lows, Roger. There's a lot of anticipation. There's a lot of excitement for the new season, and some of the videos I've seen of him jumping, he looks mustard. So I'm very excited, and that Charlie Deutsch feedback is really interesting to hear as well, and particularly that Richard is talking about the long term with him. That's great. Is there another horse that you've sourced? Is there anybody else you're going to add to the All Allowances Syndicate?
Yeah, so we've got Fred. Now, Fred is Fred
Whoa,
in
whoa,
his
whoa,
stable.
whoa, whoa, whoa. Hold the phone. Roger and Fred?
Yeah. So we had obviously Ginger Rogers, Fred Astaire, but Fred will not be Fred on the racecourse. He will have
Oh, no, Ross.
much to my mild irritation. But he will have a proper inverted commas racing name. He's a 3-year-old. Comes from a slightly. I did go back to the Czech Republic. I go to the Czech Republic regularly. I was watching the 3-year-old racing from the start of the year, trying to find a Roger Mark II. Highlighted a couple, but I think having had a bit of success with Roger, it would be true to say that the prices I was being quoted were not reflective of the ability of the horse at that time. Although I was fully aware that obviously Roger was, in hindsight, an exceptional bit of value. And I simply wasn't prepared to pay UK price in the Czech Republic because, as I see it, there was a lot of hard work that went into transforming Roger from his Slovakian form to his UK form by a lot of people that worked very hard. So I sat on my hands, didn't find anything. I had a few guys that were interested to go again if I could find something. And then I found a horse that was actually sold through Thoroughbid, and I missed him. But the gentleman that had bought him had actually done so without permission of his wife, and he was potentially available for a new price. So we picked up Fred, and I'm a big believer in things happening because I was absolutely furious with myself. I mean, I blame it on the kids' summer holidays. You lose track of all days, and I travelled to Europe on a Wednesday, whereas I normally go on a Friday, so I just couldn't have told you what day it was. Logged onto the Thoroughbid site to have a look to see what time the sale started tomorrow, and it'd already been, and the horse had been sold for what I thought was a very reasonable price. So
Pesky
we
kids.
picked up Fred, who's by Telescope, out of a nice Shade Oak stud mare, who's produced some winners. She's quite closely related to On His Own, who was second in Lord Windermere's Gold Cup. Arguably should have perhaps won it. He's a nice type. He's completely unproven. Charlie Price, who's jockey for Robbie Llewellyn, he backed him for me down at his little yard. He's just sort of he's still race riding, but he's starting to think ahead as to what he might do. When the time comes to hang up his boots, and I think pre-training and backing is something he's looking at. So he did Fred for me. Did a really lovely job on him. Again, bought into the communication side of it. So we had explanation about what feed he has, why the farrier has trimmed his feet, not put metal shoes on, because if they jump around on the road when they're young, there's more chance of slipping over and getting injury. So risk to reward, you keep them barefoot, which might mean you do a little bit less work, but it's safer. I mean, really good content for a guy who isn't on an awful lot of social media, doesn't feel overly comfortable talking in front of a camera. Did a really good job. He backed him. He spent a month with him, hacking around the fields, cantering away quietly up the gallop, and he's now with Michael, who had Fred through the summer, and he'll do 2 to 3 months with Michael, just dressage work, pole work, hacking, pretty intensive in terms of teaching him to jump, using his feet, looking at what he's doing, that sort of thing. And then we'll get to Christmas and we'll make a plan. Now, whether that plan is that he wants a bit of time, whether that plan is that he goes to Richard and gets prepared for a bumper camp and has a look at, a point-to-point training yard where it's perhaps a little bit less intense than going into a national hunt yard like Richard's. We'll sort of take a view as owners. Michael would be a very shrewd brain, as would John Bowen, who helps Michael, as would Richard. As a group of sort of 4 or 5, we'll sit down and decide what we think is best for the horse. And what's best for the horse might not necessarily be what's best for the guys in the syndicate, who of course want to go and see their horse race. But I was pretty clear from the start that it wasn't my way or the highway, but that the horse was the centre of it, and it was a syndicate to get involved with if you wanted to develop your understanding of how horses develop and the things that they need to learn in order to be to achieve their potential. And the guys have been really, really good with that so far. I was told that you wouldn't syndicate a store horse, and we did it quite successfully because I think, as we come back to with the racing coverage, people are, keen to be more educated and to have a greater understanding as to what's going on. So he'll be one for the spring, and then I'm actually off to the Czech Republic this weekend for the Grand Steep Valka Pardubice.
Nice.
Which is my first time going. I do quite a bit of work in the Czech Republic, and I've just started to do little bits of work with a couple of trainers out there in terms of a bit more jump education, because I think they feel like they're not doing as much as they could do. And there's talk of perhaps trying to put together a cross-country syndicate between some Czech owners, maybe some UK owners, particularly now that the cross-country race at the Cheltenham Festival is no longer.
Yeah, no, it's a handicap. It's actually a race that's of interest because you're not going to be going up against a former Gold Cup quality horse.
Absolutely. So the idea would perhaps be to try and pick up a horse. He'd start off with Richard in the UK and do the sort of Cheltenham series. You've got one in November, December, and then March, and maybe a little foray across to France for a cross-country race. Would then have a break and go to a trainer in the Czech Republic called Janek Popeka, and would, in the first year, go and do the sort of baby Pardubice, then come back to the UK and do a bit of cross-country racing under the care of Richard again, and in the second year, go back and try and win the Valka Pardubice, which has got €200,000 prize money, by the way. Oh yeah, it's not a goodie bag and a your weight in beer job. Now it'll be interesting to see Coco Beach's enter for Gordon Elliott this weekend, and John McConnell's got one in there as well. Be interesting to see how they go. Local thoughts are, local I mean Czech thoughts are that it's the plough that takes a bit of getting used to galloping across, and that if you're not used to gallop on it, it can sap your stamina more than it should do. And it's a very unique jumping test. It's a fearsome jumping test. And very few horses win it on their first try. Now, Coco Beach, rated 154, I think, is significantly better than anything that's gone over to Raid previously. And he might just be a class above. But it'd be interesting to see how he gets on. And our view would definitely be to sort of really build up to it, educate up to it. And we'd like to think that across sort of 24 to sort of 30 months, as it would be as a project, it might be quite interesting for people. So going to have a few chats this weekend, and that might be the third horse that we try to do.
Well, I like the fact that the plan is already in motion, the idea is there, but I really like the idea of having the horse trained in the Czech Republic, then Czechoslovakia, then the UK for a season, and then back to. That just seems like a very clever thing to do. If somebody wanted to get involved in all the Alliances Syndicate, how can they do that?
So best way is to despite some of my trolls, my messages are still open on X. I haven't closed them down. Despite there being a few people that like to point out when I tip a loser, which funny enough happens more often than I tip a winner, because you don't need to tip a greater percentage of winners than losers to make a profit, as long as your winners.
Wait a second, Ross. You're not suggesting that people wait until after the race and then criticize your opinion when they have all the facts?
Yeah, it's astonishing, isn't it?
I mean,
the wisdom of them. But no, my messages are still open, so you can find me on there. My Millar is spelled AR as well, by the way. So if you wanted to find me on Facebook, I'm not all that difficult to find. It's not a particularly common name. And if they wanted to contact you, you know full well you can pass on my mobile phone number, and they can get in touch with you that way. So yeah, plenty of ways to get in touch. But I should say that Fred is fully syndicated, so the next one would probably be the cross-country horse. Okay,
well, hopefully that will do well too. I know that some people who listen to the Final Furlong podcast and watch the show on YouTube have got involved before, and I think it's one that we can be excited about, and one that we can wholeheartedly endorse. Been burned with syndicates in the past. Be careful, do your due diligence, even with people who appear to be nice sometimes. But Ross, good guy. Good. This guy right here, good guy. Thankfully. I can't have you on a podcast with Paul Ferguson talking about novice hurdlers to follow for the season and then not ask you about a novice hurdler to follow for the season. So, dark horse, potential grade 1 class horse. What have you got for us?
No, so I should just say that Miller's Movers comes back on Tuesday, and I've got Adam Mills on for the first episode. I know you're a massive fan of, to talk all things French. But I'll give you one, and it's not one that's going to win a grade 1. Probably won't even run at Cheltenham Festival, because I'm pretty against this entirely Cheltenham-focused sort of narrative. And the bottom line is a 4-1 winner there pays the same as a 4-1 winner on a Wednesday at Newton Abbot. And very often, horses that are going to Cheltenham, as we know, are sort of bereft with ulcers and all that sort of thing through the early part of the season, and they don't win very much because their handicap mark comes down. And then when the ulcers are better in the spring, they win. And the graded horses are very lightly campaigning these days. I mean, I would think if you went back through the winners last year, 4 runs before Cheltenham would be about par. So for the horse to follow as a novice hurdler, I'm going to give you one that I think will run pretty regularly through the winter. And it's a horse called Get Me Another, who's by Ask out of a Dr. Massini mare, trained by Robbie Llewellyn. She won a mare's junior novice hurdle at Hereford last year on her 4th start. Having been pretty green and clueless in her first 3 starts, she pulled hard on occasions. She looked outpaced on occasions. She won over 2 miles at Hereford, and she won very easily, but took a fair bit of driving from some way out. To me, just galloped all the way through the line. I think she'll be good enough to win. I think she's off a mark of 91 off the top of my head. I think she'll be good enough to win off that mark over 2 miles, but I think she will definitely continue to step forward as she goes up in trip. And there is very few better trainers at racking up sequences than Robbie Llewellyn. He's done it with a number of horses in his very sort of young career. It's owned by Lynn and Martin Redmond, who've been big supporters of Robbie. They had the chase horse, whose name escapes me, that came from Christian Williams, having not won a race.
Yes.
And has won, I think, 7 or 8 for Robbie. That was a good advertisement of his talents. I think this mare, you won't see her at Cheltenham, you won't see her at Aintree, but I think you will see her in the Winners' Enclosure a fair deal, and she won't be a skinny price first time out, I don't think. I think she's a mare worth following. She's called Ask Me Another.
Okay, Ask Me Another is Ross Millar's horse to follow for the new jump season. Enjoyed this. Really enjoyed this, Ross. And SBK podcast is back. Yourself, Jess Stafford and Tom Collins previewing the races every single weekend. And Miller's Movers, where can we see all the angles, updates, where there's nothing better than getting a coffee, a nice biscuit, sitting back and listening to you wax lyrical about the racing from the weekend?
So Handicap Movers and Shakers, or Miller's Movers as SBK have called it. I'm not entirely comfortable having my surname plonked on it. It makes it seem a bit gratuitous, but that's recorded every Tuesday. They're pretty good. Alex, who edits it, normally gets it edited by Tuesday evening, so it'll be up Tuesday evening, Wednesday morning. And we're going to delve a bit more into the Irish. Last year it was very UK based, and this year we're going to have a bit more of an Irish angle as well. And we're perhaps going to find a few horses that we're going to follow through the season. Some novice chasers, novice hurdlers, graded horses, both positive and negative, a couple to oppose and a couple to follow. And I'm going to try and get a few more guests on. And as I said to you, every guest I'm going to ask, do you feel like you're being served or valued by racing at the moment? And I think it'd be interesting to see at the end of the season, people from lots of different demographics, what the consensus is, because racing must be serving someone, but I'm a little bit at a loss as to who.
Not the trainers, not the jockeys, and not the owners, and not the fans. But everybody else seems to be really enjoying it. Yeah. Ross, pleasure as always, my friend. Best of luck with Roger and Fred for the new season. You can check out all the Allowances Syndicate. We'll put a link to it in the YouTube description and the podcast description as well. And check out Ross's SBK podcast with Jess Stafford and Tom Collins. It is essential viewing after the Final Furlong podcast, of course, ahead of the weekend's racing. That's it from us. Thanks to Paul Ferguson. Thanks to Ross. And thank you for watching and listening to this episode of the Final Furlong podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it. It was a long one, It was a fun one. We'll talk to you again very, very soon. Look after yourself and each other. God bless.
The Final Furlong podcast is proudly brought to you by Jeff Banks Bet. Get up to £500 refunded as real money for new Jeff Banks online accounts after your first month of betting. Use promo code FFP500 at jeffbanks.bet. And by BetterHelp. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Our listeners get 10% off your first month. So give online therapy a try at betterhelp.com/FURLONG.